What if the very tools of torment could tell tales more riveting than the finest fiction? What if the medieval world's most diabolical inventions were not just instruments of pain but manifestations of the darkest corners of humanity's psyche? Picture this, a chamber drenched in shadows, where the air crackles with the whispers of the damned, each device a twisted masterpiece crafted to elicit screams that echoed through the ages. Think of the Iron Maiden, a coffin of agony where victims were not just confined but skewered with a sickening elegance, each spike a cruel reminder of their impending fate. Was it a masterpiece of torture or a grotesque work of art? Feel the chill as you step closer. The iron's cold embrace beckons with a sinister allure, enticing you to witness its gruesome legacy. Then there's the rack, an invention so ingeniously horrific it could make a modern-day chiropractor shudder. What are a few dislocated limbs compared to the pleasure of extracting confessions from the most steadfast of souls? Twisting and stretching, the rack didn't just break bones, it shattered wills. Imagine the cacophony of creaking wood and snapping sinew, the screams mingling with laughter from the onlookers. It was reality TV for the sadistic, ratings measured in agony inches. And let's not forget the scavenger's daughter, a device that epitomized irony in the most grotesque fashion. To be crushed and compacted, yet to remain alive, what a cruel joke. It's like being stuck in a Tinder date gone horribly wrong, where the only match is your own misery. The metal coils wrapped around the body like a serpent, squeezing until sanity slipped away like blood through cracked fingers. But wait, there's more. The Judas cradle, a sinister invention that turns the victim into a living puppet, suspended above a pyramid of despair. Straddling the peak, they teetered between life and a fate worse than death, each jolt a reminder of the torment to come. The audience? A theater of the macabre, cheers erupting like a twisted sporting event. Who knew medieval entertainment could be this bloody? The stakes rise higher still. Picture a room filled with spectators, each wearing a grin that betrays their hunger for suffering. The air is thick with anticipation, the scent of dread palpable. What makes us so morbidly fascinated by these devices? What dark desires do they stir within our modern souls? What if the ultimate truth lurked within these ancient atrocities? What if the architects of cruelty were not monsters but mere reflections of the very worst in us? As you turn each page, you'll confront this harsh reality, one electrifying revelation at a time. This isn't just a history of torture, it's an invitation to confront the shadows within our own humanity. Are you ready to face the darkness? The abyss gazes back, waiting for you to step closer. The air crackled, thick with anticipation and the metallic taste of fear. I stood there, a spectator in the dim light, feeling the chill of the stone beneath my feet seep into my very bones. A scream sliced through the silence, reverberating off the ancient walls, echoing in my chest. I knew I shouldn't be here. No one should. But each agonizing shriek only pulled me closer, like a moth to a flame, drawn to the smoke and the fire, the promise of something terrible yet intoxicating. The rack stood ominously in the center of the chamber, a grotesque altar of grotesque desires. Metal gleamed wickedly, a serpent coiled and waiting to strike. I could almost taste the dread, sharp and bitter, as it invaded the air like a poisonous mist. They say the truth stretches, but right now, it loomed ominously over us, ready to snap. I clutched my arms, fighting the urge to protect myself from an unseen threat, but the danger felt alive, pulsating. In the shadows, I saw them. Roger, his face a mask of desperation, teeth clenched so tight I thought they might shatter. He was a man fighting against the weight of the world, a weight he had put there himself. And beside him, Clara, eyes darting, haunted by memories that clawed at her heart like a ravenous beast. She was a ghost of her former self, each breath a reminder of the life she had lost, the love she had sacrificed. Her fingers trembled as she held on to Roger, a lifeline in the tempest, though even he was fraying at the edges. "I won't let them take you," he rasped, voice thick with unshed tears. The words were a promise, but I could see the doubt clouding his eyes, the way the shadows of fear played tricks on his mind. He was grappling with the truth, a truth that twisted like vines around his heart, squeezing until he gasped for breath. Clara turned her face to him, and in that moment, the world stilled. Her eyes were wells of sorrow, a reflection of all they had lost, a home, a future, perhaps even a child. What if they're right, she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips, fragile and haunting. What if I can't bear it anymore? What if, she trailed off, fear spilling from her like a cracked vase, shattering on the stone floor. Don't say it, Roger snapped, the urgency in his voice cutting through the lingering shadows. You're strong. You have to be. But strength had a cost, didn't it? Each drop of courage carried the weight of 1,000 fears, a burden that threatened to crush them both. And then, the rack groaned, a sound that seemed to echo their despair. It creaked as if it were a living thing, hungry, eager. The chill in the air intensified, wrapping around us like a shroud. It was almost as if the very walls were closing in, holding us hostage in a moment that felt both eternal and fleeting. The truth was there, lurking in the corners, teasing us with its sharp edges. Was it better to face the horrors of existence, or was it better to cling to the comforting lies, to stretch the truth until it became something beautiful, something bearable? My heart raced, each beat like a drum in the silence, urging me forward. I took a step, drawn to the grotesque beauty of the rack. There was something mesmerizing in its brutality, a dark artistry that spoke to the primal instincts buried deep within us all. It was a mirror reflecting humanity's darkest desires, the hunger for power, the thirst for control, the desperate need to inflict pain and yet somehow remain innocent. Roger, Clara's voice trembled, fragile as a whisper on the wind. What if they're right? The words hung heavy between them, a question that cut deeper than any blade. The truth, I thought, was a cruel mistress, whether stretched or contorted, it never seemed to fit the mold we desired. Roger's grip on Clara's hand tightened, knuckles white against the backdrop of their shared anguish. We can't give in to them. We can't let them twist the truth until it's unrecognizable. It's our lives, Clara. Our souls. But the fight in his voice wavered, cracks spiderwebbing through his bravado, and I felt the tension in the air shift, like a storm brewing on the horizon. The shadows encroached, nibbling at the edges of their resolve. I could feel time slowing, each second stretching into eternity. I remembered the moments before everything unraveled, the laughter, the warmth of summer evenings, the promises made under star-studded skies. I remembered how love had felt like a sanctuary, a refuge from the chaos. But now, it felt like a distant memory, a flickering flame in the wind, threatened to extinguish at any moment. Just tell me what to do, Clara's voice cracked, raw and vulnerable, a threadbare plea that echoed in the vast emptiness of the chamber. She was a tapestry of fear and hope, stitched with fraying threads of courage. I wished I could reach out to her, to tell her that love was worth fighting for, that the truth, no matter how painful, was a treasure to be embraced, not feared. The rack loomed larger, its presence a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked within us all. The truth was a double-edged sword, an instrument of torture and liberation, a paradox that twisted and turned until it was nearly unrecognizable. Clara, Roger murmured, desperation seeping into his voice. You have to believe that we can find a way out. We're not alone. But the walls whispered otherwise, shadows taunting them with laughter, echoing the doubts that crept into every corner of their hearts. The silence felt alive, a suffocating blanket that smothered hope. Outside, time continued its relentless march, oblivious to the turmoil within these walls. Each tick of the clock counted down, a reminder of the choices they faced, the truth that loomed like an executioner, ready to strike. And then, a sound, a distant clatter, a sign that the world outside hadn't forgotten them. I felt a rush of adrenaline, the thrill of impending chaos, a storm brewing, ready to unleash its fury. Was this the moment they would confront the truth? The moment when the lies would unravel, revealing the rawness beneath? Roger, Clara's voice faltered, and I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. But before she could finish, the rack creaked again, as if it were hungry, eager to consume the fragile threads of their resolve. Time hung heavy in the air, and I stood, paralyzed, caught in the web of their emotions, a silent witness to the unraveling. The truth stretched painfully, ready to snap, and I could feel the weight of it in my chest. Would they bend? Would they break? Or would they fight against the darkness, refuse to let it consume them? The answer hung in the balance, and I held my breath. The night was thick with tension, and the storm was just beginning. A cold, damp room, the scent of iron and despair thick in the air. The flickering candle casts ghostly shadows that dance along the stone walls, whispering secrets of past torment. I remember the first time I laid eyes on the rack, a nightmarish contraption, part torture device, part altar of broken hopes. The wooden beams stretched ominously, gleaming faintly in the candlelight, like skeletal fingers beckoning the damned. The sound of rusty gears grinding against one another echoed in the silence, an ominous lullaby playing to the rhythm of impending agony. Elena was there, crouched in the corner, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and defiance, a delicate figure cloaked in shadows. Her heart raced like a wild horse, thundering in her chest as she watched the scene unfold. She had come, driven by an insatiable thirst for truth, but now she found herself drowning in a sea of horror. I could feel her anguish, the weight of her dilemma pressing down on her like the very chains that bound the damned to their fates. How could she reconcile her thirst for knowledge with the blood-soaked history of this room? "Tell me it's not true," she gasped, voice trembling, as if uttering the words would somehow erase the reality of what lay before her. But the rack stood immovable, an echo of the atrocities committed in the name of justice and faith, laughing at her desperation. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but the truth loomed larger than our fragile hopes. It was a relic of the past, a testament to humanity's darkest impulses, and it thrived on our collective horror. Then there was Marcus, a scholar tormented by his own demons, his hands trembling, a scholar of the dark, a collector of secrets. He had spent years buried in dusty tomes, pages yellowed with the ghosts of the past. "History is a mirror," he used to say, reflecting us in the most grotesque ways. But here, in this chamber of untold suffering, he was confronted with the reflection of humanity at its most vile. The rack, with its intricate mechanism, became a symbol of the ceaseless struggle between power and pain. The ratcheting noise echoed in his mind, a reminder of the endless cycle of suffering inflicted for knowledge. "I remember," he whispered, almost to himself, "the stories of men and women stretched to their breaking point, their bones screaming against the pull of the wood. So many sought to hide in the shadows of history, but here, the truth is laid bare." Was this what he had sought? The truth was a beast, famished and cruel, and he was but a moth drawn to its flame. Elena's gaze flicked to the mechanism, a crude assembly of gears and levers, each one stained with the remnants of anguish. "They really thought this would bring them closer to the divine," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but it crackled with disbelief. "They thought they could extract confessions from the depths of despair." The irony sliced through the air, sharp and visceral. Reality twisted its cruel knife deeper, exposing the absurdity of the situation. "It's not justice," she continued, her voice rising, an ember of rebellion igniting. "It's madness." The clock on the wall ticked ominously, each second stretching into eternity, as if time itself conspired with the echoes of past screams. I felt the weight of their histories pressing down on me, intertwining with my own, ancestors who had endured, who had suffered beneath cruel hands. The rack had been a fearsome teacher, and its lessons were engraved in the marrow of humanity. "Will we ever learn?" Marcus asked, desperation curling his fingers around the edge of a nearby table, knuckles white with tension. Shadows flickered across his face as he struggled with the gravity of his thoughts. "Or are we doomed to repeat the horrors of our forebears?" His eyes darted to Elena, searching for an answer that hung heavy in the air, pregnant with uncertainty. "I remember," she whispered, as if the memory itself could weave a spell to banish the darkness. "I remember reading about the way they cried out for mercy, their voices swallowed by the echoing walls, their bodies twisted like branches in a storm." Her breath caught in her throat, a sob threatening to escape. "And yet, they were branded as heretics, as traitors, as less than human. What does that make us?" The torment of the rack loomed larger, a grotesque monument to our failures. It was a machine that had taken lives and shattered spirits, its very existence a reminder of our capacity for cruelty. The tension in the room thickened, palpable and electric. As Marcus's fingers grazed the surface of the cold wood, I could almost hear the faint whispers of those who had come before, voices carried on the wind, pleading for their stories to be told, their pain to be acknowledged. Each turn of the wheel, he murmured, lost in the spiral of thoughts, was a farewell to humanity. A shiver ran through me, as if the collective sorrow of centuries had seeped into the very fabric of this chamber. I could feel the chill wrap around my bones, a haunting embrace that refused to let go. Elena stepped closer, a spark of resolve igniting in her gaze as she faced the nightmarish device. "We must remember," she declared, her voice gaining strength. "We must bear witness to the horror, to ensure it never happens again." Her courage was an ember in this dark abyss, a flicker of light that cut through the suffocating gloom. But how could we hold this weight? The past was a tapestry woven with threads of suffering, and each thread pulled at the hearts of those who dared to confront it. The rack was not just a relic, it was a mirror reflecting our darkest selves. And as I stood there, caught in this storm of raw emotion, I understood that the shackles of history were not easily shaken. The room felt alive, pulsating with the weight of so many souls, so many stories. Each heartbeat echoed through the silence, a reminder that we were all connected, bound by the threads of time and suffering. The rack, with its relentless mechanism, became more than a tool. It transformed into a symbol of resistance, a call to remember and to confront our own capacity for darkness. As the tension thickened, I sensed that this moment was but a prelude to something greater. The air crackled with anticipation, the ghosts of the past swirling around us, weaving their stories into our own. And with each minute that passed, I realized that we stood at the precipice of understanding, a moment suspended in time, where history and humanity collided, refusing to let go. I could feel their eyes upon us, those who had suffered beneath the weight of the rack, their souls lingering in the shadows. They were here, witnessing our struggle, urging us to remember, to confront, to fight against the tide of oblivion. The scene held us captive, a tempest of emotion swirling like a storm, propelling us toward an inevitable confrontation with the very nature of humanity itself, an examination that would shape us forever. The air crackles with a tension that hangs like a thick fog, wrapping around each breath, each heartbeat. Outside, the thunder rumbles ominously, a warning that echoes off the cobblestones of the ancient city, but inside the dim chamber, it's the silence that gnaws at the soul. I can feel the shadows creeping, whispering secrets only the walls understand. My heart races, a wild drum in the stillness, as I stand before the Iron Maiden, its grotesque, gleaming form an iron testament to humanity's darkest urges. Cold steel, so polished it almost gleams with a sickly light, encases horrors past and promises future nightmares. I shudder, and for a moment, I'm not just a spectator in this scene, I am a part of it. I am the coward, I am the victim, and worst of all, I am the executioner. In that moment of dread, Clara bursts through the door, her eyes wide with a fear that mirrors my own. She brushes her dark hair back, strands clinging to her sweat-drenched forehead, and just in that instant, she becomes more than a friend, she is a mirror reflecting my own anguish. "We need to leave," she gasps, but her voice trembles, and I know she's already trapped in this nightmare with me. "Leave? Where?" I ask, a hollow laughter choking in my throat. "This place is a tomb, every exit leads to more walls." Clara's hands tremble, betraying the fierce resolve she desperately tries to uphold. The Iron Maiden looms larger with every heartbeat, a grotesque mother figure inviting chaos. Gerald, she steps closer, urgency crackling between us like static. This isn't just another ghost story. They say it still holds souls, screams trapped in that steel cage. Her voice drips with both fear and something darker, an inescapable lure, perhaps. I remember the legends, the whispers in the taverns, the drunken chuckles that belied an undercurrent of fear. I remember her laughter from summers past, before shadows settled on our hearts, before she became a reluctant historian of the macabre. And then, he appears, Marcus, an old friend, now the harbinger of our worst fears. "You're both fools to linger here." His face is pale, almost ethereal, as if the very shadows of this place have claimed him. "You think this is just a relic? It's a curse. It's waiting." He gestures toward the Iron Maiden, and I can see his eyes glinting with a mix of horror and envy, twisted emotions that resemble love for a nightmare. "Waiting for what?" I demand, a thread of defiance weaving into my voice, even as I feel the weight of dread crushing my chest. "For us? For the next soul who dares to believe they can escape," he whispers, stepping back as if the very room itself repulses him. "It's not just a machine. It's a jailer of our fears, our regrets. I have seen it take, and it never lets go. I remember the stories my mother told me as a child, the tales of brave knights and vile sorcerers, tales that stirred my imagination but also sowed seeds of terror deep within me. Now, as the Iron Maiden stands sentinel in the depths of my consciousness, those tales twist into nightmares. Clara, you can't believe him. I say it, but it sounds weak, even to my ears. Her gaze flickers between Marcus and the Iron Maiden, uncertainty brewing in her stormy blue eyes. Maybe we should listen, she murmurs, and my heart sinks deeper. How easily doubt can seep in, a thief in the night, stealing away the courage we once wore like armor. Run! I shout, the word lifting off my tongue like a desperate prayer. I grab Clara's hand, but Marcus remains, a stone in our path, his eyes locked on the Iron Maiden as if it offers some twisted solace. Let it take me, he whispers, a broken smile creeping across his lips. I have no more fears left to offer. I've seen the barriers of reality dissolve into shadows, and I embrace it. His madness terrifies me, but there's a darkness within me, too, a hunger for understanding, a flickering flame whispering that perhaps he is right. An odd comfort in surrender, a release from the agony of choice. Gerald, we can't leave him, Clara's voice shakes, a tether pulling me back into the storm of our shared memories. I see our childhood laughter, her hand in mine as we played in sunlit fields, and now I feel the weight of impending loss. He's lost. He needs us. But what can we offer? The Iron Maiden remains a relentless spectre in our midst, promising only despair. I can't breathe, not with the spectre of the Iron Maiden looming, its shadow stretching like a clawing hand, grasping at the very essence of our beings. Marcus! I plead, but my heart knows the truth. He's already decided. He's already crossed the threshold. Clara's grip tightens around my fingers, warmth slipping away as time drags like tar. We need to go now, I hiss, pulling her toward the door, but her resolve wavers. What if he's right? What if we are meant to face this? My breath hitches. Face what? The madness? The horror? Clara, we're alive. Don't let this place take you too. But it's too late. We are ensnared, a web of past sins and forsaken dreams, caught in the shadows of fear and despair. The Iron Maiden stands stoic, waiting, and I realize it's not just a relic, it's a mirror reflecting our deepest truths, our darkest fears. Marcus's laughter fills the chamber, a chilling echo as he steps toward the cold embrace of the Iron Maiden. You'll see, he says, voice breaking, eyes wild with madness. You'll all see. And as the door slams shut behind us, sealing us in a dance with darkness, I hear the faint sound of metal grinding, a promise of inevitable horror. The weight of the Iron Maiden crushes down, and I wonder if we'll ever escape its chilling grasp. Time stands still, the air thick with the scent of rust and regret, every heartbeat a silent scream for freedom. We are bound, forever drawn to the horror that awaits. The clock tower chimed in the distance, its echoes slicing through the suffocating silence like a knife through flesh. Each toll resonated deep within my chest, a heartbeat that matched my fear. I stood at the edge of the shadowed alley, the cobblestone slick and glistening beneath a pale, ghostly moon. The air was thick, almost electric, charged with something unnameable. I could sense it, a collective breath held tightly among the city's lifeblood, caught in the heaviness of night. I know you're here. The voice pierced the dark, raw and trembling. It belonged to Clara, her panic like a living thing, writhing in the space between us. She had always been the brave one, her laughter cutting through despair like a flash of lightning, but now she felt like a delicate wisp, flailing against the gathering storm. Show yourself! But there was nothing. Only the shadows danced, whispering secrets that could shatter the bravest heart. I wanted to reach out, to pull her back from the edge of that terror, but my hands trembled with the weight of my own demons. I remember the stories, I whispered, my voice barely audible, a prayer lost in the night. The ones about the creatures lurking in the dark, those ancient designs woven into the fabric of our city. They were supposed to protect us, weren't they? A flicker of recognition passed over Clara's face, a ghost of her usual confidence. She dared to step closer, her feet moving cautiously as if the ground itself might betray her. But what if they're not protecting us? What if they're waiting? The words hung heavy between us, a taut line pulled to the brink of snapping. We had both grown up on those myths, tales spun from the thread of fear and wonder, believing that the slick, black stone of the obelisk scattered throughout the city kept the dark at bay. They were symbols of power and history, a connection to something larger than ourselves. But now, they felt more like prison bars, encasing our minds in the fear of the unknown. I remember, I said, my voice thick with the weight of memory, the old woman at the market, the way she'd smile with cracked lips while telling us the legends of the night wraiths. How they thirst for the souls of the unwary. I could see Clara's eyes widen, the fear reflected within them. What if the stories weren't just stories? What if they were warnings? I can't, she choked, I can't think about that right now. But the truth was that we had both been thinking about it, festering in the dark corners of our minds. It pulsated between us like a living heartbeat. Shadows stretched and curled, reaching towards us, daring us to step further into their embrace. A sudden sound, a soft rustle, and my heart leapt into my throat. Did you hear that? Clara's voice was barely a whisper now, shivering with dread. It's just the wind, I lied, but as I said it, a chill crawled up my spine. The wind carried with it the echoes of 1,000 lost voices, entangled with the scent of decay that clung to the air like a shroud. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the memories that clawed their way to the forefront. The night I lost my father, the tales of the ghosts that roamed the streets, the hollow laughter of the lost. I remember, I murmured, the way he'd tell me that the myths were only there to keep us safe, to remind us of our place in the world. But what if? What if safety was just an illusion? What if the monsters were real, not just figments of our imagination but something primal, something we had unknowingly summoned? My thoughts spiraled, and I felt Clara's presence flicker beside me, a candle in the wind. I don't want to believe that, she said, her voice trembling, but the designs are everywhere. They're watching us. It was more than just a thought, it was a certainty that dripped with dread. The grand facades of the city, the intricate ironwork of the balconies, the labyrinthine streets, they all seemed to pulse with a heartbeat, and we were mere intruders in a world that thrived on our fear. Then we have to confront it, I replied, fueled by a surge of defiance, even as the hollow pit in my stomach threatened to swallow me whole. It felt ridiculous, like stepping into quicksand, but the urgency of the moment propelled me forward. We can't run anymore. The silence answered back, heavy with the weight of generations, shadows shifting beneath the weight of our words. I can't, Clara whispered, her voice breaking, I can't face this alone. And there it was, the chasm between us, a gaping wound that needed to be crossed. I reached for her, grasping her hands, our fingers entwining like vines. Together, we can break the cycle, I urged, but even as I said it, doubt gnawed at my insides. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, and I felt the pull of the night, of something ancient and hungry. I remember the tales, Clara whispered, her voice a soft tremor, the ones that say if you face the darkness, it has no power over you. But what if the darkness is us? The shadows shifted again, closing in, and I could feel their icy breath against my skin. The weight of our fears pressed down upon us like a thick fog, suffocating and eternal. But I knew, in that moment, that we had to confront whatever lay ahead, to pierce the veil of myth and face our reality. The clock tower chimed again, its resonance sending tremors through the ground. With every toll, the tension escalated, a symphony of dread and desire, fear and defiance. Let's go, I said, and as we stepped into the darkness, the city breathed around us, alive with the weight of our choices, every heartbeat echoing in the shadows, every step a reminder of our own fragility. Together, Clara affirmed, her grip tightening, a lifeline in the chaos. And as we moved deeper into the unknown, the designs of our lives twisted and turned, intertwining like the very myths that had shaped us. The night trembled with potential, the air crackling with unspoken truths, and somewhere, in the depths of the darkness, something stirred, waiting for us to unlock the door that had held it captive for too long. The wheel creaked. It was a low, ominous sound like the groan of a dying man, echoing through the damp air of the dungeon. I was there, a witness cloaked in shadows, heart pounding in sync with the slow, rhythmic turn of the wooden frame. The wheel was not just a tool of punishment, it was a harbinger of despair, a fate entwined with agony, and I could see it all play out in the flickering torchlight. Luca was strapped to it, his eyes wide, darting from the guards to the flickering flames. I remember the way he fought against his bonds, muscles straining, skin glistening with sweat and fear. "They'll pay for this," he growled, but even his defiance felt vain, a candle flickering in the face of a storm. The guards laughed, their voices sharp and cruel, echoing off the stone walls. They relished the anticipation, the bitterness of power, the thrill of control over another's fate. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine at their laughter, a dark symphony that set the tone for the suffering to come. I saw Amora in the corner, her face pale as moonlight, her eyes wells of sorrow threatening to spill over. She was not just a bystander, she was the sister of the man they had bound to that sinister wheel. I couldn't bear to look at her, yet I couldn't look away. Her hand clutched the locket around her neck, a talisman against despair, but it felt flimsy against the weight of what was to come. "Luca," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, as if saying his name aloud would summon the gods to save him from this fate. The wheel turned again, and I felt the air grow thick. Each creak was a heartbeat, a reminder of time slipping away, of the inevitable march toward suffering. I could almost taste the dread, bitter on my tongue, as the executioner approached, a shadow draped in black, eyes glinting with a sadistic hunger. He wielded a heavy iron bar, the weapon gleaming under the flickering torches, and I knew that the true horror was not just the wheel itself, but the knowledge of what it was meant to do. "Please," Luca shouted, his voice cracking, desperation clawing at his throat. "This isn't justice." But justice had long abandoned this place. It was a cruel mistress, twisting its grip around the innocent and the guilty alike. I watched the fear carve lines into his face, and I felt my own heart shatter with each passing moment. I had grown up with him, laughed with him, shared secrets under the starlit sky. Now, the stars felt impossibly distant as his cries echoed through the chamber. "Shut that fool up," one guard spat, and the executioner raised his bar high, his expression a twisted mix of pleasure and anticipation. I wanted to scream, to claw my way forward, to stop the horror unfolding before me, but my body felt like lead. I was frozen, caught in the web of my own helplessness, as I stared into the abyss of his fate. With a sickening thud, the bar met bone, and Luca's cry sliced through the air, raw and visceral. It was a sound that would haunt me, a melody of pain that would reverberate in my mind long after the wheel had stopped turning. Each strike was a drumbeat of horror, and with every thud, I felt the ground shift beneath me. I was losing my grip on reality, the world narrowing down to this moment of brutality. Amora crumpled to the floor, her sobs tearing through the darkness like shards of glass. "Luca," she cried, a plea that hung suspended in the air, heavy with despair. My heart ached, a weight pressing down on my chest as I witnessed her unravel. She was the embodiment of anguish, a figure lost in a labyrinth of grief, and I stood by, a silent observer, powerless to pull her back from the edge. The wheel continued to spin, each revolution dragging Luca deeper into a nightmare, and I felt every turn in my bones. I remember the smells, the rancid air, the iron tang of blood, the acrid stench of fear. The world outside continued without us, the sun slowly sinking, bathing everything in a twilight glow. But here, in this dungeon, time stood still, caught in a vicious cycle of suffering. Then, with a sudden stillness, the wheel halted. The silence was deafening. The guards stepped back, watching, grinning like wolves after a kill. I stared at Luca, his body a shattered mess, the defiance extinguished from his eyes. I felt reality slip, a cruel reminder that hope was a fragile thing. The air was thick, suffocating, filled with the ghosts of what could have been. I turned to Amora, knelt beside her as she rocked back and forth, lost in an abyss of sorrow. He's gone," she whispered, and each repetition twisted the knife deeper into my gut. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but words felt futile, hollow in the face of such raw pain. Outside, the echoes of laughter continued, a reminder that our world was unforgiving, and justice was a distant dream, more fiction than reality. The will had done its work, and with it, sent a chill through the very fabric of our lives. I felt its cold touch, the weight of fate pressing down like a shroud, and the realization washed over me: this was not just a punishment, it was a ritual, a dance with death that left scars on the living. I looked back at Luca one last time, and in that moment, I saw not just a man broken, but a life extinguished, dreams crushed beneath the weight of a wheel that turned endlessly, unyieldingly. As I stood in the shadows, the air heavy with despair, I knew this would not be the end. The wheel would turn again, and the echoes of pain would continue to reverberate, drowning out all hope and light as we waited for the next dreadful cycle to begin. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and dread, as the wheel creaked ominously against the backdrop of an indifferent sky. Each turn of its massive, splintered wood echoed like a death knell, warning the world of the torment it was about to unleash. I stood there, frozen, my heart racing against the oppressive silence, trapped in a moment where time itself seemed to shudder, a pause before the storm. This was the wheel, the grotesque engine of fate, a cruel judge that hungered for justice wrapped in suffering. I spotted her, Elena, eyes wide, glistening with a mix of horror and defiance. There was an electric tension between hope and despair in her gaze, a silent scream waiting to erupt. She was no stranger to pain, she wore it like a second skin. Each scar etched on her soul marked a story, a battle lost but never forgotten. "They can't do this," she whispered, the words barely escaping her chapped lips. But deep down, she knew. The wheel was merciless. And then there was Marcus, standing taller than any man should, yet crumbling under the weight of his own choices. He had once been a protector, a guardian of the innocent, but here he was, shackled by his own failures. His hands trembled as he watched the wheel, the embodiment of 1,000 broken lives, turning relentlessly. "I remember," he muttered, as if trying to ward off the memories that clawed at him. "I remember the screams." The ghosts of his past danced in the shadows, but it was too late for redemption. Today, the wheel would spin for him, too. With a sudden jolt, the wheel began to move, the rusted chains rattling as if shaking off the dust of years gone by. The air buzzed with a palpable tension, as though reality itself held its breath. Elena's fists clenched at her sides, her nails biting into her palms, each drop of blood a testament to her resolve. "We can't let them do this," she breathed, each word a spark in the darkness. But how? The townsfolk, gathered in their morbid curiosity, were mere shadows of humanity, their eyes alight with a mix of fear and sadistic anticipation. I closed my eyes, feeling the world around me dissolve into a cacophony of memories and fears. The wheel, that ancient torturer, had a purpose. It was a judge, a punisher. It had seen kings and peasants, heroes and cowards, blood spilling like ink on the pages of history. With each rotation, it wove a tapestry of grief and agony that resonated across time. I could already hear the whispers of the past, a chorus of souls who had met their fates here. It's just a wheel, I thought, but it was more than that. It was a mirror reflecting humanity's darkest desires. Marcus stepped forward, driven by a desperation that pulsed through him like a heartbeat. "Elena," he shouted, the sound slicing through the thick air like a knife. "We can't," but his voice cracked under the weight of unspoken fears. The wheel didn't care for pleas, it only craved the flesh of the guilty. He remembered the first time he'd seen it, a child watching from the shadows, eyes wide and innocent. How could he have known then what fate awaited him? The crowd's murmur swelled, an ominous tide rising to greet the execution. I could feel the dread wrapping itself around me like a suffocating shroud. It was as if the wheel was not just an execution device, but a living entity, feeding on our fears, devouring our humanity. The light dimmed as the sun began to sink into the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers of someone reaching for salvation. Elena stepped forward, her voice rising above the din. "This isn't justice. You think you can treat pain as entertainment?" The crowd shifted uneasily, their collective gaze torn between the thrill of bloodlust and the flicker of empathy ignited by her words. Her raw emotion crackled in the air, a fragile flame against the encroaching darkness. "You're all complicit," she shouted, her voice rising like a battle cry, echoing off the cobblestones. But Marcus, still haunted by his ghosts, hesitated, caught in the web of his own cowardice. He watched as the wheel turned, a grotesque dance of inevitability. A single tear slipped down his cheek, an acknowledgement of the man he had once been and the coward he had become. I remember, he murmured, each syllable a weight on his soul. I remember when I thought I could save them. With each turn of the wheel, I felt my breath hitch, the air thickening with anticipation. It seemed to mock us, to feed on our fear. And then, in that chilling moment, the first shriek pierced the silence, a cry that echoed through time itself. It was a sound of betrayal, of desperation. I shuddered as reality crashed back down around me, the wheel spinning, a harbinger of doom. Elena's heart raced, she couldn't let this be the end. "Fight with me, Marcus," she cried, desperation etching every word. Yet, he stood paralyzed, a statue carved from regret, unable to move, unable to act. The wheel demanded blood, and he could almost feel his own life slipping through the cracks, a quiet surrender to fate. The shadows deepened as the last rays of sunlight faded, leaving a twilight of despair in their wake. The wheel turned, relentless, unforgiving, a cruel reminder of humanity's darkest inclinations. Time itself seemed to warp as I listened to the haunting whispers of the crowd, blending into the cacophony of agony that surrounded us. I remember, I thought, grasping at the fleeting moments of courage, of defiance. But as the wheel spun on, I knew I was just another ghost in this haunting tale, a witness to a cycle that never truly ended. The wheel continued its grim dance, and the air thickened with a palpable sense of doom. The world around us fell away, leaving only the pulse of the wheel, the heart of injustice, the soul of despair. The night stretched on, a dark blanket over us, cradling our fears, our regrets, our shattered dreams. The wheel turned, and with it, I felt time slipping through my fingers, an endless loop of torment that would never cease. The air thickens, a suffocating weight that presses against the skin, as the dimly lit chamber hums with a sinister energy. Shadows dance on the stone walls, flickering like the last breaths of those who dared to sit in judgment or those who were judged. It was a room that reeked of secrets, desperation, and the heavy metallic scent of fear. In the center stood the Judas cradle, a sinister device, a nightmarish vision of sharpened wood and unyielding metal poised to embrace the unworthy in a cruel and torturous grip. I remember when I first saw it, the way my heart drummed against my ribs, a frantic call to escape. Yet, escape was a luxury denied to us here. My friend, Thomas, trembled beside me, his fingers digging into my arm, a vice of panic. "What if they choose us?" His voice was barely a whisper, as if raising it would summon the very darkness that loomed over us. I turned to him, my heart aching, his fear a reflection of my own. Flawed but fiercely loyal, Thomas wore his emotions like armor, brave on the outside but quaking within. "Stay close," I murmured, though my own resolve felt as flimsy as the tattered cloth that hung around our shoulders. The flickering torchlight caught his face, illuminating the sheen of sweat that betrayed his composed facade. I could see it then, the wild hope mingling with dread. What if we were next? The stories of the Judas cradle echoed in my mind, whispered tales of betrayal, punishment, and pain that stretched far beyond the corporeal. It was a game of survival, with the stakes impossibly high. Each creak of the floorboards reverberated like a heartbeat in the silence, and the walls seemed to close in with every minute that passed. I glanced at our captors, their twisted smiles barely hidden beneath hoods, eyes glinting with the allure of power. I remembered the way they'd spoken about justice, their voices oozing with a righteousness that felt more like a prelude to madness. There was a darkness that bound them, a camaraderie forged in cruelty. And then, she appeared. Ilara. She moved with a grace that belied the chaos around us, her presence a jarring contrast to the lurking shadows. She was a fierce spirit, defiant even in the face of impending doom. I had seen her stand against the oppression that sought to silence her, a flame in the choking dark. Yet here she was, her eyes darting from the Judas cradle to us, the embodiment of fear. "I won't let them take you," she declared, her voice a sharp blade slicing through the tension. But even as she spoke, doubt crept into my heart. How could she promise such a thing when the very air crackled with the threat of pain? The Judas cradle loomed omnipresent, a grotesque reminder of what lay ahead for the unfortunate. I could see it clearly now, the way the device was designed to inflict agony, the sharpened point at its apex glinting malevolently in the half-light. I remembered the stories, how the condemned would slowly be lowered onto it, how the wood would pierce flesh and soul, a descent into unimaginable torment. The horrified whispers echoed in my mind, drowning out Ilara's resolute words. Thomas squeezed my hand, grounding me. What if they choose you? The question hung heavy, and I cursed the gods for the torment that fate had woven into our lives. I knew he feared for my safety, but I dreaded the thought of his suffering even more. The fragile bond of friendship was taut, a fragile thread that could snap at any moment. Then we fight, I replied, though the tremor in my voice betrayed my facade. An absurd notion, really, fighting against such a fate. But in that moment, I remembered the warmth of laughter we shared, the way we'd spun tales under the stars, how the mundane had always seemed magical in our camaraderie. I wouldn't let that die without a struggle. The tension coiled tighter, and it was a moment frozen in time, the air thickening as the door creaked open. A figure stepped into the room, cloaked in darkness, their intentions shadowed like the corners of the chamber. Each heartbeat pulsed like a drum in my ears. I was acutely aware of the way time stretched, bending under the weight of fear. "Bring forth the guilty," the figure intoned, voice echoing ominously. My breath caught in my throat as I watched Ilara step forward, a lioness facing the hunter. "You will not take them," she declared, fierce and unwavering, as if her spirit alone could shatter the chains restraining us. The captors laughed, a sound that chilled the marrow in my bones, mocking her bravery. I could feel the world around me narrowing, the shadows closing in like hungry wolves. My heart raced as the figure reached for the mechanisms of the Judas cradle, a slow and deliberate motion that felt like the steady ticking of a clock, each tick a reminder that time was slipping away. Justice must be served, they proclaimed, their eyes gleaming with something darkly fervent. But what is justice when it becomes a tool of torment? I remembered the laughter we had shared, the hopes we had nurtured in secret, the dreams we thought would carry us beyond these walls. Ilara's defiance, my love for Thomas, it all surged through me, flickering embers in the encroaching darkness. "Stop!" I screamed, a desperate plea that echoed through the chamber, reverberating against the stone like a prayer. The laughter ceased, a palpable tension filling the air. I felt every gaze shift toward me. My heart thundered, a warrior's call to arms. "You want justice? Then let us speak our truth. Let our voices be the sword that cuts through your cruelty." The figure paused, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Ilara stepped beside me, her pulse racing in unison with mine, Thomas's grip on my arm tightening with a shared resolve. The moment was electric, charged with a tension that could either shatter or ignite. Each breath felt like a step toward an uncertain future, but we were no longer just pawns in their game. As the darkness closed in, ready to consume us, I felt hope rising, an unyielding force against despair. The shadows shifted, and in that moment, it was clear that our fight had just begun. The air crackled with tension, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. A faint whirring sound filled the dimly lit room, punctuated only by the rhythmic ticking of an old clock, the kind that seemed to mark the seconds with a sinister glee. Olivia stood frozen, her heart pounding a relentless beat against her ribs, a prisoner in her own body. Shadows flickered along the walls, stretching like fingers from a darkened corner, reaching for her, taunting her with memories she wished to forget. "I can't," she whispered, voice trembling, but the device, the heart of her torment, demanded her attention. Its surface glimmered coldly, an intricate web of circuits and wires, each one connected to her past, her choices, her failures. It was a creation born from desperation, yet it breathed a life of its own, whispering secrets of possibility that clawed at her sanity. Behind her, Jacob shifted, his eyes narrowing as he approached the device. His brow furrowed, a mix of awe and dread contorting his face. "We can't just leave it here," he said, each word a weighted stone dropping into the silence, sending ripples of dread through the air. "You know what it can do." The memory of that moment, the day they first activated it, flooded Olivia's mind with a rush. Time folded in on itself, twisting like a serpent around her heart. She remembered the exhilaration, the taste of hope dancing on her tongue, ignited by the dream of fixing the unfixable. But it came with a price, didn't it? Yes, it always did. "Don't you see? It's not just a machine," she shot back, the words spilling from her lips, burning with a desperate intensity. "It's a mirror reflecting everything we are, everything we've done." The corners of her vision blurred, her mind racing through the countless nights spent wrestling with her regrets. Each pulse of the device sent a shudder through her, a reminder of broken promises and shattered dreams. Jacob's face hardened, a mask of determination hardened by the shadows cast by the flickering light. "We can't run from our past, Olivia. We have to face it." He reached out, fingers brushing against the cool metal, and that simple gesture sent an electric jolt through her soul. "Face it?" Her laughter was hollow, echoing in the empty space between them. "You think we can just confront our ghosts and walk away unscathed?" She took a step back, her pulse quickening with the realization that they were standing at the precipice of something terrifying. A confrontation not just with the machine, but with themselves. The device was a door, and they were the ones who had to decide whether to step through. The room shuddered under the weight of their unspoken fears. Outside, the city pulsed with life, oblivious to the chaos within these four walls. She could hear sirens wailing in the distance, a reminder that the world kept spinning, while they remained shackled to the weight of their own choices. "I remember the day you found it," Jacob said softly, his voice tracing the edges of her memory. "You were so excited. You thought it could change everything." "Change everything," she echoed, bitterness coating her tongue. "And yet here we are, trapped in this nightmare." "Maybe it doesn't have to be a nightmare," he said, hope flickering in his eyes. "Maybe we can use it for something good." "Good?" The word tasted foreign on her lips. "Do you even hear yourself? Every time we touch it, it takes a piece of us. A little bit of our sanity, a little bit of our humanity." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, she saw the war raging within him, the ugly truth battling against the seductive pull of potential. She could almost see the gears grinding in his mind, wrestling with the allure of what the device promised, a chance to rewrite their stories, to reclaim lost moments and mend broken hearts. "But at what cost? Do you think we can reshape the world?" she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of despair. "Or are we just fools chasing shadows?" He hesitated, the silence stretching between them like a taut wire ready to snap. "I don't know," he finally admitted, his vulnerability raw and exposed. "But I can't just stand by and watch everything spiral out of control." "Neither can I," she replied, her heart a cacophony of conflicting emotions, fear, anger, longing. The device beckoned them, a siren song that promised salvation even as it threatened to drown them. The clock ticked on, each second an ominous reminder of their fleeting time. A dread loomed heavy in the room, saturating the air with unspoken words and unresolved conflict. Olivia felt the weight of their choices, pressing down like a vice, squeezing the breath from her lungs. The device hummed, a low vibration that resonated within her chest, calling to the parts of her that yearned for resolution. She stepped closer, almost against her will, her fingers trembling as they hovered just above its surface. "Are we ready for this?" she asked, the question hanging in the air like a fragile crystal, beautiful yet precarious. Jacob's gaze was steady, a fierce determination igniting within him. "We've faced the worst already, haven't we?" "I remember," she murmured, pieces of her past swirling in her mind like a storm gathering strength. "I remember the choices that brought us here. I remember the pain." He reached out, wrapping a hand around hers, grounding her in the chaos. "Then let's make new choices," he urged softly, the electricity of their connection crackling between them. In that single moment, the device pulsed, as if responding to their intentions, their fears, their hopes. A kaleidoscope of emotions whirled around them, love, regret, anticipation, each one a thread woven into the fabric of their shared reality. "Together," she asked, her voice barely a whisper, yet it resonated with the weight of a promise. "Always," he affirmed, determination etching itself into every line of his face. And as they stood on the brink, the shadows danced around them, whispering secrets of the past while the future beckoned with wild potential. Time seemed to stretch and bend, a cosmic dance of chaos and order, waiting for the moment they would step through the threshold. The device before them had the power to reshape everything, but the true question remained, what would they become in the process? In that charged silence, their hearts beat as one, echoing the rhythm of the universe itself, and just like that, everything changed. The machine awaited, alive with possibility and peril, a living testament to their intertwined destinies. Here, at this pivotal juncture, they stood on the edge of the unknown, ready to face whatever came next. The air crackled with a tension so thick it felt like the universe was holding its breath. Shadows danced on the cobblestones, flickering like desperate souls, while the sun dipped below the horizon, spilling fiery reds and oranges across the sky. A shriek pierced the twilight, an echo of something primal weaving through the streets of ancient Sicily. It was a sound that cut through the clamor of the bustling marketplace, a sound that made the heart stutter and the stomach twist. The brazen bull waited, silent and sentient, its bronze exterior glinting ominously in the dying light. In that moment, I remember the dread that clawed at my insides, a visceral panic that mirrored the cries of the condemned. The bull was not merely an execution device, it was a grotesque sculpture of agony, a twisted art form that married beauty with horror. I stood there, paralyzed, watching as its gaping maw yawned open, a cruel invitation to the unspeakable fate that awaited the unfortunate. "Please," Ilara whispered, her voice barely rising above the wind's mournful sigh. Her eyes were wide, filled with a cocktail of hope and despair, as she clutched her brother's arm. "They can't. They won't." But it had already been decided, the mob had spoken, their bloodlust a living entity, thrumming through the air like a heavy drum. I could see it in their eyes, the twisted thrill of the crowd, the morbid curiosity that drove them to the brink of ferocity. Her brother, Lysander, stood tall beside her, a resolute figure against the approaching darkness. But I could see the tremble beneath his skin, the way his jaw clenched as if he could somehow will away the injustice. He was supposed to be their protector, the steadfast guardian of Ilara's fragile heart. Yet here, in the grip of the bull's wicked design, he felt helpless, raw, exposed. "We can't let this happen," he muttered, the words a prayer tossed into the tumult. I remember the way fear tasted, bitter and metallic, on my tongue. The crowd surged, a beast with 1,000 faces, hungry for spectacle. Their laughter was a grotesque symphony, bubbling up with a sickening ease, drowning out the last remnants of humanity. Each heartbeat echoed the rhythm of tragedy, and I could feel my own pulse quicken, an unholy alliance with the chaos surrounding us. "Look at it, Ilara," Lysander said, voice strained. "Look what they've done." The bull loomed large, its hollow interior a chamber of horrors, the very air inside it thick with the scent of soot and despair. How could something so beautiful be so grotesquely perverse? Bronze and fire, the marriage of art and agony, the sheer absurdity of it struck like thunder, rattling through the bones of the onlookers. The crowd was a tempest, faces shifting like shadows, each one a mask of morbid enthusiasm, yet beneath the bravado lay a trembling uncertainty. I could sense the unease rippling through them, a shared guilt that crawled through the night like a serpent. But they would not back down, they never did. The urge to witness suffering was too intoxicating, too powerful. They craved it like a drug. And then, in that chaotic swell, I saw them, the condemned. Bound and broken, dragged forth like sacrificial lambs, faces pale and painted with the horror of their fate. My heart sank, a leaden weight that made the world spin. Their eyes found Ilara's for a fleeting moment, a flash of recognition, a desperate plea for salvation that hung in the air like a prayer unanswered. "Don't look," Lysander urged, turning, pulling her close. But the sights were burned into her retinas, and the echoes of their despair would haunt her long after the flames faded. Every scream would become a ghost in her mind, haunting the corners of her dreams. The fire crackled to life, licking at the air, a turbulent dance of orange and gold that mirrored the chaos within my soul. It snarled, hungry, as if sensing the impending horror. I could feel it, every crackle, every pop resonated through my very being. The bull was alive, a beast awakened by the screams of its victims. "Why?" Ilara's voice was a small, trembling thing, a whisper lost in the cacophony. "Why does it have to be this way?" Her question hung heavy, a truth too painful to acknowledge. The world was a twisted tapestry, woven with threads of brutality and beauty, and in that moment, she looked so small, so fragile. But Lysander's eyes narrowed, a storm brewing within. Because they want to feel something, even if it's the thrill of another's pain. His voice was a low growl, filled with a fury that threatened to spill over. "We can't let them win. And just like that, the embers of rebellion ignited. The fire was not just in the bull, it was in them too. I could see it flickering in their eyes, a shared resolve igniting against the backdrop of horror. I could feel the energy shift, a current weaving through the throng, igniting passions long buried. Together, Lysander said, his voice rising above the din, we will burn brighter than this horror. But the crowd was a beast, primal and demanding, and I knew the moment they would choose to feed it. I felt it in the air around me, the palpable fear, the desperation feeding the flames. I remember the weight of history pressing upon us, centuries of brutal spectacles etched into the stones beneath our feet. This was a cycle, a twisted dance that had played out countless times before, but it didn't have to be the end. As the flames roared higher, I could see the truth shimmering just beyond the chaos. There was a choice. There would always be a choice. The brazen bull would not silence the hearts of the brave, nor would it snuff out the flickering hope that dared to rise against tyranny. With a surge of courage, we stepped forward, one step at a time, into the maelstrom of fate. The embers caught our breath, the cries of the condemned mingling with our own, a chorus of defiance against the horror. Together, we would challenge the darkness. Together, we would carve our own truth into the annals of this cruel world, and, if we had to, we would burn brighter than the flames themselves. The night hung thick with a silence that felt almost sentient, a weight that pressed down on the shoulders of the small crowd gathered beneath the flickering torchlight. The air was alive with the bitter scent of sweat and anticipation, sharp enough to slice through the darkness, and in that moment, time stretched into something grotesque, as if the universe itself held its breath. I remember the chill that crept up my spine, a whisper of foreboding that mingled with the stench of fear. The bull, loomed in the shadows, a magnificent beast of raw muscle and fiery spirit, but to us, it was the embodiment of something far darker, a creature forged not just from bone and sinew but from the very essence of legend and lore. I was there, wedged between two men, both trembling beasts in their own right. One was Tiberius, a man with a heart as big as his bravado, always the first to volunteer for any foolish endeavor, but tonight, his hands shook as he clutched the hilt of his sword. The other was Cassius, a brooding figure with eyes like storm clouds, haunted by the weight of his own choices. He stared at the bull as if it were a graveyard of his regret, a monument to the sins he couldn't outrun. I remember how he clenched his jaw, the muscles twitching, as if he were trying to swallow down an ocean of remorse. The bull was more than just a creature, it was a vessel of history, a tapestry woven from the threads of sacrifice and glory, rage and redemption. Legend spoke of how it came to be, forged by the tears of a goddess and the fire of 1,000 lost souls. In the shadows, whispers echoed of ancient kings who had danced with death in the arena, their blood mingling with the earth, feeding the very ground that birthed the beast. Each tale was a dagger plunged into our hearts, each story breathing life into the monstrous entity that loomed before us. I remember the first time I heard the tale of the bull, spun by the crackling firelight in a tavern where the laughter was always tinged with the bitterness of despair. The old man, a myth wrapped in rags, spoke of a time when gods walked among mortals, and the bull was a gift, a punishment veiled in splendor. They say it was once a man, a proud king who dared to defy the heavens, and thus, the gods twisted his form, turning his nobility into something grotesque, something powerful. The crowd shifted, the tension crackling like a live wire, and Tiberius stepped forward, his bravado faltering. Tonight, he shouted, but his voice cracked, fear clawing at the edges of his bravado. Tonight, we reclaim our honor. But honor was an empty promise, a ghost that flickered in the torchlight, and I could see Cassius roll his eyes, the well of his despair bubbling to the surface. Do you believe that? He spat, the word slicing through the air, sharp as glass. Honor is a lie we tell ourselves as the bull takes our lives, one by one. His voice was a dark melody, beautiful yet mournful, and I felt the weight of his conviction settle over me, thick and suffocating. And then, there it was, the bull, its eyes like molten gold, glinting with a knowledge that felt ancient, predatory. It shifted, muscles rippling under skin taut as a drum, and the crowd recoiled, an instinctive gasp rising like the smoke from the pyres of old. I could see in its gaze a reflection of our fears, the fear of becoming nothing, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of facing the truth of our existence. As the horns glinted in the torchlight, I was taken back to stories of sacrifice, how brave souls, those once vibrant with life, had willingly stepped into the maw of the beast, believing their death would be a trade for glory, a ticket to the annals of history. The thought was intoxicating, a blend of beauty and horror. I remembered a time when I, too, had been foolish enough to dream of valor. But valor had its price, a toll extracted by fate, and in that moment, as the bull snorted, steam rising from its nostrils like a spectre of the damned, I felt the gravitational pull of what was coming, a confrontation that would echo through the ages. Tiberius raised his sword, its blade glimmering like hope in the darkness, and I saw the flicker of doubt cross his features. He was a boy playing at being a man, and the weight of history bore down on him like the hammer of a blacksmith. For glory, he yelled again, but it was a whisper now, a desperate plea that fell flat against the shadows. Glory? Cassius mocked, his voice low and lethal. What do we have to show for glory but graves? What do we honor when we feed the beast? His words hung heavy between us, a chasm that threatened to swallow the bravado of the night whole. And then, just like that, the air shifted. The bull charged, a whirlwind of muscle and fury, its roar splitting the night. I felt my heart race, a drum echoing the chaos around me, as the crowd erupted into screams, a cacophony that drowned out reason and clung to the marrow of my bones. In that instant, every tale I'd ever heard collided with reality. I saw the legends played out before me, the stories that had shaped my understanding of the world. The bull was no longer just an animal, it was a living embodiment of every tale, every sacrifice, every moment of despair we had ever felt. It was the culmination of our fears, a mirror reflecting the darkest corners of our souls. I remember thinking, knowing, that we were not merely spectators in this unfolding legend, we were participants, players in a game far larger than ourselves. The intricate dance between human and beast, driven by instinct and desperation, was about to reach its fever pitch, a collision of fate and choice, history and myth, and in the middle of it all stood my two companions, and there I was, heart-pounding, breath-caught, waiting for the inevitable strike that would send us spiraling into the depths of our own legacies. The bull's charge echoed in my mind, a sound that would haunt dreams yet to come, low, guttural, terrifying. I felt its energy, raw, unfettered, like a tidal wave crashing against the cliffs of our pretensions. I remember the blood rushing to my ears, drowning out everything but the primal need to survive, the pulse of history thumping beneath the skin of the night. And there, in that fraught moment, I realized, the stories may never end, but they could change us forever. The bull, with its haunting gaze, had come to collect what was owed. The air hung heavy, thick with the stench of decay and despair, a scent that clung to the very fibers of the earth. A low moan cut through the oppressive silence, reverberating against the jagged rocks that surrounded the clearing. There, beneath a gnarled tree twisted like the souls of the damned, sat Tarek, his hands bound, trembling as they brushed against the wet earth. He could feel the cold seep into his bones, a prelude to a fate darker than death itself. The sun, cruel and indifferent, cast harsh shadows, mocking the dread that wrapped around him like a serpent. I remember the first time I saw Tarek, a fleeting smile that could light up the darkest corners of any room. But today, that smile was a spectre, haunted by the spectre of betrayal. The glimmer in his eyes had long been extinguished, replaced with a hollow gaze that mirrored the abyss of fear that consumed him. What had he done to deserve this? The wooden trough loomed nearby, grotesque in its simplicity, a vessel of torment. Two hollowed tree trunks bound together with rotting rope, Tarek's fate was sealed within those dark confines. A shiver ripped through him as he recalled the whispers echoing in the marketplace, the accusatory glances that had pierced through him like daggers. He had been too trusting, too naive, caught up in the tangled web of love and loyalty, unaware that the very people he cherished would turn him over to his executioners. In the shadows stood Layla, her heart thundering in her chest, caught in a tempest of her own making. She had been a fool to believe in the sanctity of loyalty. She had thought herself unbreakable, a warrior in her own right, yet here she was, plagued by the weight of her choices. Tarek once called her fierce, a tempest that swept away all fears and doubts. But today, she felt small, crumbling under the enormity of her guilt. How could she have traded his freedom for the fleeting safety of her own skin? The sun dipped lower in the sky, transforming the vibrant hues into a canvas of ominous reds and purples, a warning perhaps, that the end was nigh. Tarek's breath quickened, each inhale a desperate plea for mercy, for an escape that would never come. He could hear the thickening silence around him, the rustling leaves echoing like whispers of judgment. He was a prisoner of his own making, and the world was closing in, tightening like a noose around his throat. "I didn't betray you, Tarek." Layla's voice broke the spell of silence, desperation laced within her words as if they could somehow bridge the chasm between them. But Tarek's eyes, dark and stormy, held no warmth, only the bitter taste of betrayal. "I wish I could believe that," he rasped, the very sound escaping his lips felt like shattered glass, cutting deeper than any blade. "But here I am, and there you stand, the executioner of my fate." Time stretched, an endless abyss, as Layla stepped closer, each footfall echoing in the hollow void. She could almost reach out and touch him, but the chasm between them felt insurmountable, an ocean of painful silence filled with unspoken words. A part of her wanted to scream, to claw at the earth until the soil swallowed her whole, but her voice lay trapped in her throat, a scream turned to ash. "I loved you," she cried, the truth spilling from her lips like blood, the raw honesty cutting deeper than any sword. I thought sacrificing you would save us both." But there was no salvation here, only the oppressive weight of impending doom. The sun was sinking, the shadows growing long, and Tarek's heart raced, not from fear, but from a fierce and unrelenting anger. The betrayal burned within him, hot and consuming, igniting the embers of his spirit. And then there was Rummy, the architect of their demise, lurking in the shadows with a wolfish grin, a phantom haunting their every breath. He watched with relish as Tarek's fate unfolded, relishing the agony that hung in the air. Rummy had once been a friend, a brother in arms. Now, he was the harbinger of destruction, the dark jester enjoying a macabre performance. "I always knew you were too weak to survive," Rummy taunted, a sinister glee dancing in his eyes. "Look at you now, Tarek, stripped of your will, your strength. This is the end of your story, and I'll be the one to pen the final chapter." The words sliced through Tarek like a blade, the truth of them wrapping around his heart like iron chains. But within him, a fire ignited. Was it defiance? Rage? The urge to fight back against the tide of despair? "I will not go quietly into that dark abyss," he spat, each word fueled by the remnants of his shattered spirit. "You may bind my body, but my soul will not be yours to claim." In that moment, he was not the victim, but a phoenix rising from the ashes of betrayal. The shadows trembled around him, a symphony of anguish and defiance. He could feel the weight of the world pressing down, but he refused to buckle. He would face the scaphism, not as a broken man, but as a warrior standing on the precipice of eternity. Layla watched, her heart a drum pounding in her chest, as Tarek fought against the bindings that held him captive. The desperation of their circumstances bore down on her like a leaden weight, but the flicker of hope sparked in her heart. Could she, too, rise from the ashes of her decisions? Could she sever the ties that bound her to this nightmare? The sun dipped beyond the horizon, surrendering the sky to darkness, and Tarek's voice echoed in the night, a haunting melody that pierced the stillness. "You will not break me, Rummy. Even in the face of death, I am alive." As the shadows deepened, the world around them blurring between reality and nightmare, they stood on the edge of an abyss, emotions teetering like the dying light. The fate of their souls entwined in a dance of betrayal, loyalty, and unyielding hope, wrapped in the chilling embrace of scaphism. And as the first stars appeared in the night sky, they whispered promises of a truth that lay just beyond grasp, a truth that might yet save them all, or consume them completely. The air hangs like a thick mist, a warning that settles in your chest, constricting every breath. The sounds of distant wails echo through the darkened alleyways, where shadows dance like memories of terror. You stand at the edge of a cobbled street, a flickering torch illuminating the faces of those around you, pale, hollow-eyed spectators, their expressions a grotesque mix of fascination and horror. You can feel their heartbeat, a synchronized drum of dread that rises and falls, urging you closer. I remember the first time I heard the name, the breaking wheel. It clanged in my mind like a death knell. It's not just a tool, it's an orchestra of agony, a symphony of suffering played out in the most public of stages. The wheel, once a humble device for grinding grain, is transformed into a harbinger of despair, an axis upon which lives are torn apart. The thought of it leaves a bitter taste on your tongue, a reminder that humanity can twist even the most innocent of objects into instruments of cruelty. In the throes of this unsettling spectacle, two figures emerge from the crowd: Margot and Julian. Margot stands rigid, her hands balled into fists, knuckles white as bone. She's been forced into the role of the observer, yet her heart races not with excitement but with a desperate urge to stop the darkness that envelops them. Julian, beside her, is a juxtaposition of calmness and chaos, a man who wears his cynicism like a cloak. He chuckles at the morbid curiosity of the crowd, yet there's something hollow in his laughter, a facade that cracks under the weight of the horrific reality before them. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting a pallor over the proceedings, Margot's gaze catches a glimpse of the wheel, its spoke stained with the remnants of past horrors. Each mark tells a story, a haunting whisper from the souls that have endured its wrath. She remembers her brother, taken by the authorities for a crime he never committed. They said he was a thief, a dishonor to their family name, but she knew the truth: he was just a boy, a dreamer, caught in the web of a corrupt world. She bites her lip, the taste of iron flooding her senses, as she clings to the memory of his laughter, echoing through their dimly lit home. "Are we truly going to watch this?" she whispers, voice trembling, as if the very act of speaking might summon the dark forces that linger nearby. Julian shrugs, eyes glinting with something dangerously close to apathy. "What else is there to do? We're all dying anyway, love. Might as well witness some good old-fashioned suffering while we're at it." His voice drips with sarcasm, but it's the pain behind it that cuts deeper. He remembers a time when he believed in justice, when he thought the world would right itself, but faith has a way of shattering beneath the weight of disillusionment. The tension crackles like static in the air as the executioner steps forward, his silhouette imposing against the flickering torchlight. Clad in dark garments, he wields a heavy iron bar, the very embodiment of despair. I can hear the crowd's collective breath hitch, a gasping intake that vibrates through the night. Margot's heart thrums in her chest, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of flesh. She knows she should look away, that every moment spent watching is a moment stolen from her own soul, yet her feet remain rooted to the cobblestones. The wheel spins in her mind, its spokes grinding against the very essence of humanity. She thinks about the fingers that will soon grasp the wooden rungs, the bodies that will contort in an agonizing dance. Nothing could prepare her for the sight of it, a figure bound and terrified, limbs splayed against the wooden frame, a pitiful testament to the brutality of mankind. She glances at Julian, whose eyes have darkened, as if absorbing the weight of the moment, and she wants to scream at him, to shake him back to reality. Instead, she feels the suffocating silence wrap around them like a noose. Why do they cheer? She finally manages to croak, the question tearing from her throat like a wounded bird. How can they revel in this? Julian's laughter echoes back, hollow and bitter. It's easier to lose oneself in bloodlust than to confront the emptiness we all carry, he replies, voice low, yet it reverberates with a haunting truth. They need this. We need this. It's a distraction, an escape from the madness of our own lives. In the distance, the executioner raises his weapon, and Margot's breath catches, an uninvited guest in her lungs. With every sweep of the iron bar, the crowd gasps, a collective intake of horror and excitement, but all she can think of is her brother's face, twisted in anguish, a ghost that haunts her every waking moment. She remembers the day he disappeared, the cold hand of despair gripping her heart, and she realizes this spectacle isn't just an execution, it's a reminder, a harsh punctuation mark on the story of humanity, a brutal lesson in the futility of hope. As the wheel turns, bodies twist, and shadows elongate, the night becomes a canvas, painted with the grisly strokes of suffering and despair. The air thickens with tension, every heartbeat echoing through the darkness as the line between spectator and participant blurs. In that moment, Margot knows she cannot remain passive. She feels the fire ignite within her, a primal urge to fight against the injustice that has claimed so many lives, including her brother's. "Let me go," she shouts, her voice cutting through the cacophony of horror. The crowd turns, eyes widening in shock as she breaks free from Julian's side and steps forward, heart pounding with the rhythm of her resolve. This is no longer a spectacle, no longer a passive observation. This is her moment to confront the darkness, to challenge the very essence of what it means to be human. Julian watches, his heart racing, torn between admiration and fear. He knows the danger of her defiance, he knows that standing against the wheel could cost her everything. Yet, as Margot steps into the light, he can't help but feel a flicker of hope, a delicate flame that dances against the oppressive night. The wheel spins faster, the darkness swirling around them, and in that instant, the tension shifts, reshaping the very fabric of their reality. They are no longer mere spectators, they are players on a stage drenched in blood and betrayal, and the world holds its breath, waiting for the next act. As the wheel creaks ominously, Margot raises her chin, ready to face the executioner, ready to break the cycle of suffering. The night holds its breath, the shadows pulse with anticipation, and the story is just beginning, a haunting echo that will reverberate through time, a reminder that in the depths of despair, the spark of resistance can ignite a fire that burns brighter than any darkness. The air in the chamber crackled with a sinister tension, hanging thick like fog over a forgotten graveyard. I stood there, paralyzed, the scent of iron mingling with sweat and fear, an unholy cocktail that clawed at my throat. In the center loomed the iron chair, a grotesque monument to suffering, its surface glinting cruelly under the dim light. It was a trap, a promise of agony and despair, and my heart raced, each beat a countdown to the inevitable. I remember the first time I saw it, how it drew me in, a moth to a flame, while a cold shiver slithered down my spine. The chair was adorned with wicked spikes, a twisted crown of thorns waiting for its next victim. I had thought it a mere relic, a tale spun from the minds of the deluded. But now, standing there, I felt its dark allure seep into my bones, its hidden whispers echoing the cries of those who'd met their fate in its merciless embrace. Beside me, Clara trembled, her wide eyes reflecting terror and defiance. She was resolute yet fragile, a bird with clipped wings, caught in a storm. I could see her clenching the fabric of her dress, knuckles white, as if it would ground her against the rising tide of despair. "We can't let them do this," she whispered, voice quaking like the leaves in a windstorm. "We have to fight." But her words hung in the air, a prayer without hope, drowning in the darkness that surrounded us. And then, there was Elias. His fists were clenched, muscles coiled tight like a spring ready to snap. I watched him from the corner of my eye, the shadows playing tricks on my mind, the flickering light casting a monstrous figure against the stone wall. He was a warrior, once, full of fire and conviction. But here, in this wretched place, I saw the flicker of doubt creep into his gaze, the realization that valor meant little when faced with the inevitability of pain. "Clara," he said, his voice a low rumble, "we can't challenge the darkness. It's too strong." His resignation cut deeper than any blade. In that instant, I felt the weight of our circumstances press down like a leaden shroud. We were trapped, caught between the iron grip of fate and the desperate desire to escape. The clock on the wall ticked, each sound a grotesque reminder of the time slipping away. I remembered dreams of freedom, memories of laughter echoing through sunlit fields, but they felt like ghosts now, faded echoes of a life that seemed impossibly distant. The door creaked open, a sliver of light slicing through the oppressive gloom. A figure emerged, cloaked in shadows, a harbinger of pain. The executioner's face was obscured, but I felt his gaze bore into me, a predatory hunger that threatened to consume all that I was. My pulse quickened, a wild drum in my chest, as I fought against the chill creeping up my spine. I could sense Clara's panic rise, the energy in the room shifting like a turbulent sea threatening to engulf us. "Step forward," the figure commanded, voice smooth as silk yet laced with malice. The sound echoed in the chamber, rebounding off the walls like a taunting laugh. Elias shot me a glance, and I could see the storm of emotions battling within him, fear, anger, determination. I wanted to scream, to beg him to run, to flee with Clara and leave this nightmare behind. But the reality was stark, there was no escape. Not here. Not now. Clara took a shaky breath, her resolve hardening like steel. "No," she cried, stepping forward as if to shield us from the impending doom. "You will not take him." Her voice cracked, but within it, there was a fierce spark. I admired her bravery, a flame flickering defiantly against the encroaching darkness. The executioner paused, bemused, and for a heartbeat, time hung suspended. I could feel the weight of her bravery, a heavy mantle that draped across us, binding our fates together. The iron chair glimmered, a mocking sentinel waiting for its next offering. I felt its pull like gravity, a hypnotic call luring Clara closer. "Don't," I begged, my voice barely a whisper. "Please don't." But it was too late. Her courage ignited a fire within me, a shared flame that sought to consume the fear, the dread, the hopelessness. I stepped forward, heart racing, shouting against the tide. "We'll fight together." And with that, the chamber exploded into chaos. The executioner lunged, but Clara and I moved as one, driven by desperation. I could feel the heat of her anger, the warmth of her spirit mingling with my own. We were two souls tangled in a web of fear and determination, pushing against the tide of despair that threatened to drown us. But as I reached for Clara, I felt the cold grip of reality sink in. The iron chair loomed behind us, a chilling reminder of what awaited should we falter. The darkness whispered promises of pain, beckoning us to surrender to it, to succumb to the oppressive weight of despair. I remembered the stories of those who had come before, their screams echoing in the chambers beyond, and it sent a primal fear coursing through my veins. "Hold on!" I shouted, grasping her hand tightly, our fingers weaving together like a lifeline. I felt the heat of her pulse, strong and steady, contrasting with the frigid air around us. Could we truly escape this inferno, or were we merely postponing the inevitable? The executioner advanced, shadows stretching, and for a moment, I thought of the iron chair, its spikes glistening, waiting patiently for our surrender. But we wouldn't give in. Not today. Not ever. We were more than the sum of our fears, more than the echoes of past souls trapped in the cycle of suffering. The clock ticked mercilessly on, but for us, in that moment, time stood still. We were caught in the crucible of terror, forging our own destiny amid the flames. Together, we would face the darkness, hearts pounding in time with the relentless rhythm of life and death. And as I looked into Clara's eyes, I saw not just fear but a fierce spark of hope, an indomitable will to fight against the tide, to defy the darkness that threatened to consume us. The heat of our resolve grew, a flame igniting the shadows, and I knew that whatever awaited us in the grip of the iron chair, we would not face it alone. Together, we would carve our path into whatever came next, hearts beating fiercely in defiance of fate. In the dim light of the chamber, pain hung like a thick fog, heavy and palpable, wrapped around the figures hunched in the shadows. The air crackled with an electric tension, the kind that makes your skin prickle, as if the very walls were whispering secrets of agony. A single drop of sweat traced its path down my back, a reminder that fear is a living, breathing thing, weaving itself through the fibers of your being. I could hear the distant clang of metal, a sound that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the tortured soul tethered to a wooden chair, hands bound, eyes wide with terror. The flickering flame danced, casting grotesque shadows that writhed against the stone, a ballet of suffering. And there, in the center of this theater of despair, was Sir Elias, a man whose conviction had become a weapon sharper than any blade. His face bore the weight of 1,000 decisions, each one etched into his skin like a map of regret. The heated metal glistened beside him, a wicked promise of retribution. He had been a knight once, fighting for honor, but now he stood on the brink of a precipice, teetering between justice and madness. "Do you hear that?" he whispered, his voice a gravelly echo, heavy with the burden of wrongs unrighted. "It's the sound of truth screaming for release." The air was thick with the scent of burning flesh, an aroma that clawed at the throat, choking the spirit. I remember my own heart banging in my chest, a frantic drumroll announcing the arrival of dread. Across the chamber, Ilara, the woman once known for her unyielding spirit, now sat trembling, a flickering candle flame extinguished by doubt. Her hands, once capable of wielding a sword, now clawed at the fabric of her dress, a desperate attempt to anchor herself in a reality that was slipping through her fingers like sand. "Elias," she pleaded, her voice trembling, "this is not who you are. This will not cleanse you." Her eyes glistened with tears that reflected the firelight, a haunting mix of desperation and love. But love has a way of twisting into something dark, and in that moment, the divide between them felt insurmountable. Elias turned, the heat of his anger radiating like the very metal he held, the heated brand that promised to carve out confessions like a sculptor chiseling stone. "You don't understand," he growled, the raw pain in his voice slicing through the silence like a hot knife. They think they can hide, but the truth will burn them as it has burned me. I remember the way Elara flinched, a minor movement that reverberated through the stillness, a reminder of her vulnerability. In the flickering light, her resolve flickered too, wavering like the shadows on the wall. The room pulsed with tension, each heartbeat a countdown to the inevitable. Each moment fell like a stone, heavy and unyielding, creating ripples across the surface of their fractured relationship. "Tell me," Elias barked, his voice a whip crack, his eyes aflame with fervor. "Tell me the name of your accomplice." The words hung in the air, a noose tightening around them both. Elara swallowed hard, her throat dry as dust, memories swirling in her mind like ghosts. She could see the faces of those who had wronged them, the shadows of betrayal inching closer, suffocating. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "This won't bring them back." But Elias had lost himself somewhere in the darkness. Each moment he spent in the presence of heated metal was a moment he spiraled deeper into obsession, the clinging tendrils of vengeance wrapping tighter around his heart. I could see it, the ghost of the man he once was, swallowed by the fire of his own making. The metal glowed ominously, a serpent waiting to strike, and I felt the heat radiate against my skin. I was no longer a mere observer, I was ensnared in their struggle, caught in the web of their torment. The inevitability of suffering echoed in my ears, a haunting melody that played on a loop. "Elara, you were once my strength," he said, his voice softer now, tinged with an aching vulnerability that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. "Help me find it again." But how do you pull someone back from the precipice when they can no longer see the edge? She could feel his pain, the depth of his sorrow, but she also bore the weight of despair that came with knowing that love alone could not save him from himself. "Elias, this is madness," she breathed, the words spilling forth like a torrent. "There's no redemption in suffering, only more suffering." In that moment, the chamber fell silent, the only sound the crackling of the fire, and I felt as if time had stopped, suspended in the air like a heavy fog. I could see the flicker of doubt in Elias's eyes, the slightest crack in his armor. It was the moment where reality collided with despair, where love and vengeance danced dangerously close, both desperate for dominance. With a shuddering breath, he took a step back, the metal brand hovering like a specter between them. "What would you have me do?" The question hung, a bitter fruit ripe for the taking. A clock ticked somewhere in the distance, its hands moving ever forward, relentless. The silence was a knife, cutting deeper as the seconds raced away. The shadows in the room seemed to breathe, their presence urging the inevitable confrontation. "I remember," Elara finally said, her voice steady now, "the way you looked at the world before. You saw beauty in the broken, light in the darkness. You were a beacon, Elias. Not a monster." And just like that, the air shifted. Time resumed its relentless march, but the tension crackled, raw and electric. The pasture of their memories bloomed around us, vivid and alive. I could almost hear the laughter they once shared, the whispered hopes and dreams, now drowned in a sea of anguish. Words hung heavy in the air, promises unfulfilled looming like dark clouds, and I felt the urge to scream, to shatter the silence, to pull them back from the brink. But something darker loomed, a shadow of fate whispering that this moment, this crucible of pain, was necessary for rebirth. And just as the flames reached a fever pitch, illuminating the darkness in a hellish glow, I understood, understanding the use of heated metal in torture practices was not merely about the brutalities inflicted. It was about the dance of souls caught in a cycle of pain, love, and the haunting question of redemption that would linger long after the fire had died down. As the heat pulsed and shadows loomed, the stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything. The cold metal of the chair bites into Caleb's back, tethering him to a fear that wraps around his throat like a noose. He gasps for breath, each inhale sharp, jagged, a reminder of the thin line between life and the dark abyss that yawns at his feet. The dripping sound echoes in the damp, suffocating air, slow, methodical, like the heartbeat of a predator stalking its prey. Water, an innocent enough element, now bears the weight of his terror, an executioner cloaked in the guise of necessity. He remembers the dreams, the whispered promises of a life unchained. But dreams are illusions, they vanish like smoke as reality crashes in. The walls close in, painted in shadows that shift and writhe, mocking him. A single flickering bulb casts a sickly glow, creating a stage for his anguish. He can feel it, or rather, he can't feel it. The numbness creeps in, curling around his thoughts, promising safety and silence, but he knows better. Silence is the enemy. Silence is the ticking clock that counts down to despair. And then there's Maeve, standing just out of reach, her eyes pools of fear and defiance. The light of the bulb reflects in her tears, each drop a history unspoken, a bond teetering on the edge of destruction. She clutches her hands, knuckles white, trembling not from the chill of the room but from the weight of choices unmade. "Caleb," she whispers, voice barely a murmur, but it slices through the tension like a shard of glass. "We can't let them take you." But who are they? Shadows that flicker in the corners of his mind, faceless figures defined only by the promises of pain they wield. He knows, he feels it in the marrow of his bones, they're coming for him. "I remember," he breathes, the words choking him, "the last time I felt safe." The water rises, droplets forming a cruel sheen on the floor, swirling like the maelstrom brewing inside him. Every heartbeat echoes louder, pounding in his ears, a frantic drumbeat of fear. The memory of the last time he faced this abyss claws at him, pulling him back to that moment of suffocation, the way the world faded to black, air stolen, drowning in a liquid nightmare. Maeve steps forward, her voice laced with desperation. "We have to fight, Caleb. We can't let them win. I won't lose you." The way she looks at him, her eyes fierce yet trembling with uncertainty, ignites a flicker of hope in the hollow of his chest. But hope is a fragile thing, and he can feel it teetering on the edge of despair, ready to plummet into the depths. "Fight," he laughs, the sound hollow, echoing off the walls. "How do you fight something that lives inside you?" He searches her gaze for an answer he knows she can't provide. They are both trapped in this twisted game, the rules written in blood and fear. The water is cold now, lapping silently at his feet, a reminder of what awaits him. He swallows hard, fighting the rising bile of panic. "I remember the smell of summer grass, Maeve. How it snapped underfoot, how the sun warmed my skin." Each word feels like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea, but even as he speaks, the memories slip through his fingers like sand. Darkness closes in as the sound of footsteps echoes in the corridor outside, a sinister rhythm that quickens the pulse of dread. It's them, those cold, faceless tormentors. Caleb's breath quickens, each inhale sharper than the last, the chill of reality slicing through his bravado. "Caleb!" Maeve's voice rises, urgent, pulling him back from the edge. "Stay with me. We can't let fear win." Her hands reach out, grasping his, grounding him in this moment. He can feel the warmth of her touch, a fragile tether to life, yet even that feels tenuous. In the periphery, shadows shift, whispering secrets of despair, and Caleb's heart races with a primal instinct to flee. But where? The walls close in, the floor tilts, and he knows, this is a trap designed for the broken-hearted, the lost. The water drips, drips, mocking him, beckoning him to surrender. "Fight," she insists, voice trembling but filled with a fierce light. "Fight for us. For the memories we can still create. For the dreams that still linger in the corners of your mind." He watches her, and for a heartbeat, the world narrows to just her. The way her hair catches the light, the way the fear flickers in her eyes, and he can see the ghost of every moment they've shared, the laughter, the warmth, the simple joy of being alive. "I remember," he whispers, clutching her hand tighter, "I remember what it feels like to breathe." He fights against the rising tide of despair, against the dark claws that grip his heart. He won't drown, not today. The water may lap at his feet, but he refuses to let it pull him under. Maeve's spirit ignites a fire within him, a spark that defies the oppressive darkness. Together, they stand, two souls against the weight of a world determined to snuff them out. And as the footsteps grow closer, an inevitable confrontation lurks just beyond the door, a reckoning that promises to tear them apart. The darkness whispers, but so does hope, an echo of unyielding strength in the midst of turmoil. Together, they are a flickering flame, refusing to be extinguished, their hearts racing against the clock, desperate, defiant. "Not today," Caleb breathes, steeling himself against the shadows, ready to face the rising tide of fear. The water may crash against him, but he will fight, and in that fight, perhaps they can both find their way back to the light. The sound of water dripping echoes through the dimly lit chamber, each drop a harbinger of dread, a countdown to horror. I can feel the slick, cold surface beneath my palms, rough concrete, stained with the memory of screams. In the corner, the shadows seem to breathe, growing thick with the weight of despair. There's a man in the center, restrained, trembling, a frayed thread of sanity unraveling before my eyes. His name is David, once a man of conviction, now a vessel of anguish, reduced to a whisper of who he was. I remember the first time I saw him. The air was heavy with smoke and tension, a thick fog of uncertainty that clung to our skin. He stood tall then, defiant, a beacon of resistance. But the moment the water poured over him, drowning his cries, drowning his very essence, that resolute spirit began to crack. Each splattering wave was a reminder that he was not in control, that his soul was laid bare before unseen eyes. I can't shake the image of his wide, frantic gaze, gasping not just for air but for hope, for a reason to keep fighting. Beside him, there's Rachel. She is fierce, a lioness in a cage, but the cage is closing in. Her heart is a chaotic symphony of rage and sorrow, coursing through her veins with every heartbeat. She was once a staunch advocate for justice, her voice ringing through the halls of power, but now she stands on the precipice of despair. Each time she watches the water drown David's resolve, the weight of her own failure suffocates her. I should be doing something, she whispers, though the reality is that she feels as powerless as the next, her fists clenched against the futility of it all. Waterboarding is no longer just a technique, it becomes an orchestra of terror, a dance of shadows that waltzes through the mind, twisting and tearing at the fabric of humanity. I remember the first time I felt its grip, a single, desperate breath stolen straight from my lungs. It's a calculated cruelty, a manipulation of breath and consciousness, where fear becomes the puppeteer, stringing together moments of violation with surgical precision. Each session becomes a psychological play, a twisted narrative where the stakes are not just survival but the very core of one's identity. In those moments, time becomes a ghost, a cruel specter that shifts and elongates, stretching seconds into an eternity of dread. The world outside fades, it's no longer about politics or ideology. It's just him and the water, an endless cycle of fear and submission. I remember David's outstretched hand, fingers curling around the thin air as he begs for mercy, for the sweet release of consciousness. His breath, shallow and rapid, becomes a metronome of despair, each gasping intake marking the remaining beat of his will. The psychological effects are insidious, a creeping poison that seeps into the mind long after the physical torment ends. Memories twist, morphing into nightmares that haunt the soul. David no longer dreams of his family, his friends, instead, he is chased by shadows, dark figures whispering his failures in the dead of night. The water becomes a character in his mind, a phantom that clings to his thoughts, tainting the very essence of who he is. I am not me, he confesses, his voice a shivering whisper, broken and splintered. I am a ghost in this body. Rachel watches as he crumbles, her heart breaking with every fracture she witnesses. She is consumed by guilt, by the realization that her fight for justice is merely a facade, a shallow attempt to mask the horror of what is happening in that dark room. Her memories flood back, each rally, each impassioned speech ringing hollow against the backdrop of David's torment. What have I done, she cries, the weight of her own involvement suffocating her. Each second becomes an eternity, every glance at David a reminder of her impotence. Outside, the world spins on, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding within those four walls. Clocks tick relentlessly, a reminder of time lost, of moments that can never be reclaimed. But in here, time is distorted, it becomes a cruel game of endurance. I can see Rachel's resolve hardening, her rage simmering beneath the surface. She knows she must act, but the fear gnaws at her. What if she becomes the next victim of the water's embrace? The thought terrifies her, steals her breath, much like the water steals his. I can't let this continue, she pleads, her voice rising above the dripping silence. We have to fight back. But the words hang heavy, a desperate prayer in a world that seems deaf to their suffering. What does it mean to fight when every action feels like a drop of water in an ocean of despair? Her heart races, her thoughts a chaotic storm as she wrestles with her own demons. Each second that ticks by is a reminder that David's suffering is not just his own, it is her burden, too. As the water pours once more, I feel the room constrict, suffocating us all in its grasp. I see the fear in David's eyes, the flicker of hope extinguished, and I know this cycle must end. The water is not merely a method of torture, it is a reflection of the darkest human impulses, an invitation to witness the fragility of life itself. In those moments, the lines blur. Who is the torturer, and who is the victim? Who is the observer, and who bears the weight of complicity? The air is electric with tension, and I realize that the emotional battle is just as fierce as the physical one. We stand on the brink of something profound, something that might shatter the cycle of despair if only we can find the courage to confront our own shadows. The water continues to flow, relentless and unforgiving, and I know this moment will never truly end. It will ripple through our lives, a haunting reminder of what it means to be human, to suffer, and to fight against the tide. Rachel's eyes are fierce now, a fire igniting within. "No more," she utters, her voice steady, a battle cry resonating through the silence. In that moment, I see the potential for transformation, for resilience. The water will always flow, but perhaps it can be stopped by the will of those who dare to resist. And as we stand here, locked in this moment of terror, I know the fight is just beginning. The air was thick with dread, a palpable thing that clung to the walls of the stone chamber, suffocating and heavy. I could hear the distant echoes of torment, moans that twisted and curled like the serpentine shadows cast by flickering torchlight. Each cry seeped into the marrow of my bones, an immortal reminder of suffering that resonated through time. I was not just a spectator here, I was a participant in this grotesque ballet of agony. In the center of the room stood the rack, a monstrous contraption made of dark wood and iron, gleaming with the stains of past miseries. It loomed like a beast, waiting to devour the unwary. The sound of the creaking mechanism was ominous, a malevolent whisper promising unspeakable pain. I could almost see the ghosts of its victims, their eyes wide with terror, their breath hitching in their throats as they were slowly stretched, their limbs tormented like the strings of a puppet. And then there was him, the torturer. A shadow draped in black, he moved with a predator's grace, each step deliberate and measured. His hands, calloused and strong, caressed the tools of his trade like an artist admiring his brushes. He wore a mask of indifference, but beneath it, I sensed something darker, something primal. It was a thirst for power, for control, that no amount of sanctimony could hide. He was a maestro of misery, conducting symphonies of despair with a hand that knew no mercy. And then there was me, caught in the crosshairs of this hellish tableau. I remember the moment I entered this nightmare, a foolish curiosity tugging at my heart, the allure of history wrapped in a cloak of morbid fascination. I had always joked about being a historian, but now, standing on the precipice of madness, I felt like a fool, an eager student in a masterclass of suffering. "Do you know what it feels like?" I asked, my voice a tremor in the stillness. The torturer turned, a glint of amusement breaking through his menacing calm, like sunlight piercing through dark clouds. "What it feels like to take life and twist it. To draw out a scream like a painter drawing out a line." He laughed, a cruel, dry sound that echoed off the stones, sending shivers dancing down my spine. "It's a dance, really. An art form. Every twitch, every gasp, every fleeting moment of agony is a brushstroke on the canvas of existence." As his gaze bore into mine, I felt the weight of his words settle deep within me. I could see the ghosts again, trapped in a loop of their own pain. I remember their faces, each one a reflection of fear, regret, defiance. I could feel their stories clawing at me, desperate to be told. Amidst this haunting tableau, there was Clara, an unwilling participant in this macabre performance. I saw her once, bound on the rack, her slender body stretched and pulled, the tension palpable in the air. Her eyes, once filled with fire, now flickered like a candle ready to snuff out. She was fighting, though, a warrior in her own right, clinging to the remnants of her spirit even as the torturer savored every second of her despair. "Don't scream," she whispered to me, though I was not the one in pain. "They feed on the sound." I wanted to believe her, wanted to scream for her, but my voice failed me, caught in the web of my own terror. I remember the look in her eyes, a mixture of anguish and courage, as if she were battling not just for her own life but for the souls of those who had come before her. It was a fleeting moment, a raw, electric connection that anchored me in this hell. The torturer approached her, a predatory smile on his lips. "You have such spirit, my dear. Such fire. It's a shame to extinguish it." He tightened the ropes, and I winced as if the pressure were on my own throat. Clara's breath hitched, her body writhing against the unyielding wood, but her gaze met mine, steady, unwavering. "I remember the stars," she gasped, the words spilling from her like a prayer. "They were so bright once, you know? I remember their light." The torturer chuckled, his voice a dark melody. "Stars offer no comfort here, sweet girl. Only darkness reigns in this chamber, and pain is the only truth." I felt the room constrict, time stretching like the limbs on the rack, as I clung to Clara's words. Her memories were my own now, echoes of a world beyond this torment, a world where laughter danced in the air and love thrived like wildflowers. The thought of it was dizzying, intoxicating, a lifeline in a sea of despair. Suddenly, clarity pierced through the haze of fear. I understood then, it wasn't just about the suffering inflicted by the torturer, but the resilience of the human spirit. Clara's courage shone brighter than any star, a beacon amidst the darkness. I could not scream, but I could bear witness. I could remember. With every passing moment, I felt the tide of despair begin to shift. The torturer, lost in his twisted delight, did not see the spark igniting within Clara, nor did he sense the silent rebellion blooming in my heart. I was not just a historian anymore, a curious soul in the face of horror. I was a witness, a chronicler of pain and defiance. The chamber echoed with the tension of 1,000 heartbeats, a countdown to an unseen climax. Clara's eyes locked with mine, a silent promise exchanged, this was not the end. I felt my pulse quicken, the rhythm of life pounding in my ears. The torturer was a mere shadow, a footnote in this narrative of survival. Time stretched, bending like the limbs on the rack, and I knew we were on the brink of something monumental, a confrontation with fear that would shake the foundations of this chamber, this world of suffering. And so, we stood there, caught in the web of our intertwined fates, waiting for the moment when the darkness would be pierced by the sliver of light, a promise of salvation humming in the air. The pain was not just theirs or mine but ours, a shared burden, a collective scream echoing through eternity. In that moment, the rack was no longer a tool of torment but a crucible of transformation, a place where pain and resolve intertwined like lovers in a deadly embrace, promising that even in the face of despair, hope could still flicker like a candle against the wind. The tension hung thick, a living entity, ready to explode, to break free from the chains of the past, propelling us into a future ripe with possibilities. I held on to Clara's gaze, a lifeline tethering me to humanity, and I knew this was just the beginning. The room was silent, heavy like a tomb, but for the soft, rhythmic ticking of a clock, its hands crawling forward, each second a whisper of dread. Shadows danced on the walls, flickering like nervous flames in the dim light, and there sat Alex, gripping the edge of his chair, knuckles white against the dark wood. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple, glistening in the gloom. His breath came shallow, stuttering, as he waited for the door to swing open. He could almost hear the heartbeats of his own fears echoing in the stillness, amplifying the suffocating tension that filled the air. In the corner, a figure loomed, Marcus, the torturer. His silhouette was monstrous, a dark spectre with an aura of cold malevolence. The flickering light caught the glint of metal on the table beside him, instruments of agony laid out like a grotesque buffet. Each tool had a history, a cruel purpose that wove through the fabric of society, threads of pain that stitched this place into the very heart of darkness. Alex's stomach churned. He remembered the stories, the hushed conversations, the way people looked away when they spoke of him. He's just doing his job, they would say, but Alex knew better. Marcus shifted, his voice low and gravelly, cutting through the heavy air like a knife. You must understand, Alex. Pain teaches. It reveals truths buried deep in the soul. The word slithered into Alex's ears, a venomous whisper that settled coldly in his chest. Truth. Alex croaked, the word tasting bitter on his tongue. Or is it just your twisted enjoyment? You revel in this, don't you? He sat tall, defiance flickering in his eyes. But inside, he quaked. The fear was a living thing, clawing at his insides, as he thought of the faces of the victims, each one a ghost haunting the crevices of his mind. Revelry is for the weak, Marcus replied, his tone chillingly calm, as if it were a conversation about the weather. I wield the truth, Alex. I put the knife to their flesh, but it is their own secrets that tear them apart. He leaned closer, eyes glimmering with a predatory hunger. You've heard the whispers, haven't you? The cries for mercy? They beg, but I am not their savior. I am their mirror. And then, Alex remembered. He remembered the night he stood outside the walls of this very place, the screams leaking out into the still night air, wrapping around him like chains. His heart had raced then, filled with righteous anger, but the longer he listened, the more he felt the weight of his own complicity. The world had turned a blind eye while men like Marcus wielded power over the vulnerable, the frightened, those who only sought to be heard. You think you're teaching them something? Alex asked, his voice quaking. But all you teach is fear. A fear that ripples through society, infecting us all. Marcus grinned, a chilling sight devoid of warmth. Fear is a necessary tool. It keeps the masses in line. It reminds them of their place. Look around you, Alex. Society thrives on the balance of power. You take away the fear, and chaos reigns. The room felt smaller now, the shadows creeping closer, suffocating. Alex's mind raced. He recalled his mother's tremors as she spoke of the brutality, her eyes clouded with memories she could barely articulate. She had often whispered about the unseen forces that governed their lives, the torturers, the enforcers, those who fed on the agony of others to uphold their own sense of worth. You're nothing but a coward hiding behind your tools, he spat, trying to drown out the memories of her fearful gaze, of the tears she shed in silence. Marcus's expression darkened, the calm facade cracking like ice underfoot. You misunderstand me, boy, he hissed, closer now, the stench of his contempt mingling with the fear in the air. I am not the monster. I am the answer to a problem you refuse to see. Society created me. The darkness in them gave birth to me. I am their reckoning. The tension coiled tighter, a noose around Alex's throat. Each word from Marcus was a stab, a wound that threatened to bleed out the last of his resolve. Outside, the world continued, a cacophony of life oblivious to this macabre theater, a mother laughing with her child, lovers embracing, a dog barking in the distance. They were free, unattached to the heavier truths, while he was bound here, shackled by his own conscience. Society is rotten, Marcus, Alex whispered, heart pounding. And you're just a symptom of that rot. In his mind, he pictured the victims, the forgotten souls, each one a story severed too soon, each one a reminder of what it meant to be human. He saw their eyes, wide with terror, pleading for release, begging for mercy that would never come. Then let it rot, Marcus sneered, eyes glinting with a madness that sent a shiver down Alex's spine. But I will be here, a shadow in the smoke, reminding them that every truth has its price. You think you can save them? You can't. You can only watch as they unravel. The clock ticked on, relentless, smoothing over the pain like a lullaby. And in that moment, as Alex's breath quickened and his heart raced, he realized he was teetering on the edge of something profound and terrifying, a confrontation that had nothing to do with Marcus or his sinister tools. It was a reckoning within himself, a battle against the darkness that loomed not just in this room, but in the very fabric of society. Alex felt the weight of it all, the scars of a world that had turned brutal and unyielding, the echoes of screams that would never fade. As the shadows lengthened, the air grew thick with an unshakable dread, pulling him deeper into a chasm of uncertainty. He thought of the past, the ghosts that whispered in the night, tales of pain, power, and the silent complicity of the masses. The lines between good and evil blurred, and as he looked into Marcus's eyes, he realized the true struggle lies in the soul of humanity itself. A battle that would never end, a cycle of pain that would forever bind them. And it was in that moment, one heart racing, one torturer's twisted justification, that Alex understood. He was not just a witness, he was part of a larger tapestry, woven with fear and hope, pain and redemption. The shadows thickened, and the clock ticked on, each second a reminder that the story was far from over, an endless loop, a haunting melody that would echo through the ages. The cold metal of the thumbscrew glinted like a predator's eye beneath the flickering torchlight. Its cruel design, a simple contraption of iron and gears, was deceptively small, yet it held the power to twist and crush the very essence of a soul. I could hear the faint rustling beyond the stone walls, the whispered breath of the night creeping in like an uninvited guest. I stood there, heart thundering, the air thick with tension. In that moment, the weight of dread settled on my shoulders, a shroud made heavier by the knowledge of what lay ahead, an encounter that would shatter us all. Clara was beside me, her eyes wide, reflecting both terror and a flicker of defiance. She had always been the brave one, the spirited spark in our otherwise monochrome lives, yet I could see the shadows creeping in, wrapping around her heart like vines strangling a tree. "I can't let them take him," she whispered, voice trembling, fury boiling beneath her skin. But the reality was merciless. A single wrong move could doom not just her, but the entire village hiding in the folds of this desolate land. I remember the warmth of her hand in mine, a fragile lifeline, as we edged closer to the door. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and something far more sinister, fear, mingling with the metallic tang of blood. My own heart raced, each beat echoing like a war drum in my ears. "They won't stop until they have what they want," I murmured, trying to quell the storm brewing inside me. But could I dampen the fire in Clara? No. She was a tempest, she'd always been. Through the cracks in the door, I caught a glimpse of the chamber beyond, dark figures moving, shadows dancing dangerously close to the light. They were like phantoms locked in a grotesque waltz, a reminder of how fragile life could be. Each breath felt like a gamble. I could feel the weight of Clara's determination pressing against me like a tangible force. "We have to go in," she insisted, a fire in her voice that ignited an ember in my chest. But the irony was not lost on me. Here we were, terrified in the face of a small device that could rip apart the human spirit. The thumbscrew, small but deadly. Time was a twisted concept in that moment, stretching and warping until it felt as if the world was suspended between breaths. I thought of the ghosts from my past, my brother's laughter, our shared dreams, shattered by the heavy hand of the executioner. I remembered his face, pale and drawn, like a canvas of broken hopes. What if they find us? What if we fail? I dared to voice, but Clara shook her head, fierce resolve flashing in her gaze. "Then we fight, with everything we have." With each passing second, the tension coiled tighter around us, an invisible serpent waiting to strike. The thrum of the world pulsed around me, every heartbeat felt like an echo, resonating with loss, love, and desperation. I could hear it, the whisper of despair, the soft lament of those who had come before us, trapped in this nightmare. They had played their parts, twisted and broken, consumed by the very thing that should have been their salvation. Then the door creaked open, a sigh escaping into the silence. Before us stood the chamber, a tableau of darkness, illuminated by a single flickering flame. The thumbscrew sat there, innocent yet malevolent, nestled among the tools of torture like a serpent among flowers. I wanted to look away, to shield my eyes from the horror, yet something kept me riveted, a morbid curiosity that clawed at my insides. I could see the executioner, a hulking figure shrouded in shadow, wielding the thumbscrew with an ease that belied its gravity. "Welcome," he rasped, a voice like gravel, laden with the weight of years spent harvesting pain. "You seek to save him, but you come armed with nothing but hope." The cold laughter that followed sent shivers down my spine, an icy reminder of the futility of our mission. Clara stepped forward, defiance shimmering in her eyes, a lioness confronting a beast. "Hope is all we need," she declared, and in that moment, I felt an overwhelming surge of admiration for her, a fierce, protective love that ignited every nerve in my body. "We will not let you take him." The tension in the room thickened, a storm cloud pregnant with unspoken threats. The executioner's grin widened, revealing teeth like broken glass. "Then you shall experience what it means to be crushed." He lifted the thumbscrew, the metal gleaming with a promise of pain, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This was not just a tool, it was a cruel reminder of the cost of defiance, a gatekeeper to our fears. I could feel the pulse of my own terror. It echoed in the back of my mind, a reminder of the ghosts that haunted me. The memories of laughter turned to screams, of warmth turned to chill. I remembered the stories told around flickering fires, tales of brave souls who ventured into darkness and emerged victorious. But this was no story, this was visceral, raw, and unforgiving. "Clara," I breathed, the weight of my voice a fragile whisper against the roaring chaos. We can't let him win." But my words felt hollow against the reality unfolding before us. I watched as the executioner moved closer, the thumbscrew a deadly promise, and panic clawed at my throat. In that moment, Clara's hand squeezed mine, her pulse racing like a drum roll heralding the inevitable. Together, she whispered fiercely, and I could feel her strength cascading through me like a tidal wave, hope laced with desperation, a wild dance on the edge of oblivion. The world around us bent and twisted, shadows stretching like fingers grasping for the light, and I knew that we were standing at the precipice. There was no going back now. The weight of the thumbscrew bore down on us, a small yet insatiable creature, hungry for suffering. And as the cold air wrapped around us, we gathered the last remnants of our courage, ready to face the haunting echo of despair, knowing that in that confrontation, we were not just fighting for another life, but for our very souls. The air was thick with a weight that pressed down into the marrow of your bones, the kind of silence that screams. In a dimly lit chamber, shadowed by the oppressive stone walls, two figures stood frozen, their breaths shallow and uneven. The cold metal of the thumbscrew glimmered ominously under the flickering torchlight, a cruel twist of history, an unyielding harbinger of pain. I remember the way the light danced off its surface, like a predator's eyes catching the final rays of the dying sun, hungry and waiting. Emma stood there, trembling, her heart pounding in a frantic rhythm that drowned out all else. She was a scholar, a seeker of truth wrapped in layers of hope, but in this moment, she was just a girl alone, standing on the precipice of despair. Her hands were clammy, fingers fidgeting with the hem of her worn dress as she locked eyes with Marcus, her brother, who had once been a beacon of strength. But now, he was a shadow of himself, a man plagued by guilt, his face drawn tight like a bowstring pulled to its limit. "Why, Marcus? Why did you let them take me?" Her voice trembled, a whisper wrapped in a scream, the kind of question that gnawed at the edges of his sanity. Each word was a dagger, sharp and unforgiving, piercing through his facade of calm. "You said you'd protect me." "I tried, Emma, I swear I tried," he replied, the bitterness of defeat lacing every syllable. His voice was raw, stripped of its usual resolve, hauntingly fragile, echoing through the chamber like a funeral dirge. The thumbscrew loomed large behind him, its purpose chilling and grotesque, a testament to humanity's darkest impulses. I remember tales of its origin whispered in the halls of history, how it had been conceived in a time when justice wore a mask of cruelty, a favorite tool of the inquisitors and the corrupt. The metal contraption, simple yet insidious, was designed to crush bones and shatter spirits, a merciless instrument used to pry confessions from unwilling lips. Its function was not just physical, it drew forth the darkest fears, feeding off the trembling souls that graced its presence. Across the room, the executioner, a figure swathed in shadows, shifted, his eyes glinting with an unsettling mix of anticipation and boredom. He was a master of the macabre, a puppet dancing to the tune of power and pain, and he reveled in the chaos he created. "What will it be, then?" he taunted, his voice smooth like silk, yet laced with the gravel of a graveyard. "Will you confess your sins, or shall we play a different game?" Emma's heart raced as a wave of icy dread washed over her. She could feel the weight of her brother's desperation, the way his spirit cracked under the strain of choices not easily made. She wanted to believe that the world was just and that love would conquer all, but the reality in that moment was too stark, too raw. The thumbscrew was not merely a tool, it was a mirror reflecting the darkness within humanity, a reminder of how easily fear can strip one of dignity. "I remember when you told me about the stars," Emma said, a feeble attempt to anchor herself in a memory of innocence, her voice quaking as if the very words could weave a spell of salvation. "You said they were like dreams, vast, unreachable, but always watching over us." "Emma," his voice cracked, the weight of regret heavy in the air. "This isn't a fairy tale. It's a nightmare." Time felt suspended, a cruel jest as the hands of the clock ticked forward, each second stretching into eternity. The executioner leaned closer, his sinister grin a rictus of anticipation. Or perhaps you'd like to see how many turns it takes for your brother to break. In that moment, everything shifted. The air crackled with tension, a palpable energy that threatened to erupt. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown, and with each pulse, Emma realized the truth: the thumbscrew was not just a device of torture, it was a catalyst for transformation. It would either sever the bond between them or forge it anew in the fires of shared suffering. Marcus stepped forward, defiance slowly creeping into his demeanor, a flicker of the man he used to be. "I won't let you hurt her," he growled, the promise reverberating with the bone-deep conviction of a guardian angel. "You can turn that thing all you want, but I will never betray my sister. I would rather die first." The executioner chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth, echoing like the caw of a raven in the gloom. "Such noble sentiments, but we both know how this will end." Emma felt the weight of dread coiling around her heart like a serpent, squeezing tighter with each breath. She wanted to shout, to scream, to turn the tide of fate itself, but the reality pressed upon her like a tombstone. Would she be able to save her brother from the madness that loomed before them? Or would the thumbscrew carve a rift between their souls, one too deep to mend? Outside, the world continued to spin. The moon hung in the sky, a voyeur to their plight, its silver light mingling with the darkness, casting long shadows that danced upon the stone walls. Time, relentless and indifferent, marched on. In the depths of their despair, the echoes of history whispered around them, reminding them that the thumbscrew was not merely an instrument of torture, it was a reminder of the fragility of hope and the icy grip of fear. As the situation reached its boiling point, Marcus clenched his fists, one thought crystallizing in his mind: he would protect Emma at all costs, even if it meant facing the darkest corners of his own soul. The chamber buzzed with electric tension, every breath drawn in weighed with unspoken fears and unquenchable love. The thumbscrew, that ghastly harbinger of suffering, sat in its cruel silence, awaiting its moment of reckoning. The air thickened with the scent of impending doom, and as the clock ticked on, with every second, they stood on the edge of a precipice, teetering between salvation and damnation, bound by the unbreakable chains of blood and love.